Hi everyone, my name is Charnel Austin and I'll be doing my viral presentation on the Ebola virus. Ebola is caused by the Ebola virus. Most people simply just call it Ebola, but it is also known as the Ebola hemorrhagic fever, or EHF. The reason why is because hemorrhagic fever can affect many organs throughout the body. It can damage blood vessels and the body's ability to regulate itself when someone becomes infected with the virus. Um, Ebola is also a member of the Filoviridae family, and I will get into more detail in a later slide about the Filoviridae family. So the Ebola virus is a pretty nasty virus. It has 5 different strains or 5 different species that has affected the sub-Saharan nations since 1996 till now. 4 out of the 5 strains can infect humans, but the fifth strain, known as the restin Ebola virus, causes diseases only in primates such as apes and monkeys, but does not infect humans. The most deadliest strain and also the most recent is the Zaire Ebola virus. This virus caused the West African Ebola outbreak not too long ago in the year 2014 and continued on till 2016. And this type of virus was known to be one of the largest Ebola outbreaks to date. So, approximately 2 in 5 people who were infected by this strain of Ebola died. So, those odds aren't very good. This outbreak was the most severe and recorded history in regards to both the number of human cases and fatalities. So, the Ebola virus was named after the Ebola River in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the virus was first reported back in 1996. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, Ebola is considered to be classified as a biosafety level 4, which that just means that this type of virus is a very dangerous pathogen. Um, HIV is currently classified as a level 2, and perhaps Ebola is considered a level 4 due to its mortality rate. Ebola has a very high mortality rate of 50 to 90%, proving that it is very highly pathogenic. So, as you can see, there are numerous symptoms that occur when someone is infected by the Ebola virus. Initially, patients will start off with a fever, possibly a headache, muscle pains, and chills. Later on, they may experience internal bleeding resulting in vomiting and coughing, which is why the Ebola virus is also known as the Ebola hemorrhagic fever because of these symptoms. So symptoms can appear within 2 to 21 days after exposure, but typically it's around 8 to 10 days. That seems to be the most common. And it's also possible that some people who end up recovering from Ebola can develop lifelong complications such as joint and vision problems. Treatment. So, unfortunately, there's currently no known cure that has been identified. The FDA has not approved a vaccination or any type of medication to treat or prevent Ebola. But I do know that there are some scientists who are working on developing a vaccination for the Ebola virus. But currently, as I said, the FDA has not approved any type of vaccinations or any medications. So, the type of treatment that you would expect if caught early is supportive care, typically inside a specialized hospital, and they can deliver medications to support the person's blood pressure, manage their breathing, or manage breathing machines, and treat any other type of infections that may occur while being sick. So there's also oxygen therapy, and typically this is just, maintaining the person's oxygen levels, as well as the blood. Um, they can also use IV fluids to help balance electrolytes throughout the body, and basically just sustaining the person to help them fight off the infection. You can also do blood transfusions. This can replace any deficiencies within the body's bloodstream, and these types of interventions, if they're used early, it can also increase the person's chance of survival. So, in order to have a successful recovery from people who become infected by the Ebola virus, they really, really need good supportive care. And also, a big factor is how their immune responds to the infection. So, people over in Africa, they typically don't have the best health care provided. Therefore, they may have been, or that may have been a factor when it came to fatalities because of their healthcare system. So, people who do recover can develop antibodies that can last up to at least 10 years, but it's not proven that the person is immune for life or immune to other strains of the virus. So people who do recover could still possibly transmit the virus via bodily fluids such as semen, and I will go into more detail in a later slide. So, how is the virus transmitted? So, Ebola is a zoonotic disease, meaning that it involves animals and humans and can be transmitted via animal to animal. So, that means that it can't be transmitted through the air, or spread through the air by water or by food. It's typically spread from humans to animals, animals to animals, and so forth. Um, so, scientists believe that the very first person who became infected by the Ebola virus came into contact with an infected bat or maybe even, a primate, and then transmitted the virus either via mucous membrane, touching the eye, or entering the nose or mouth. Um, so, for example, someone, is buying meat and this meat is contaminated with the Ebola virus and they touch the raw meat and then that person ends up like touching their eye because they have the infection on their hand, they then become infected by the virus. So, there's this thing called the spillover event. And this occurs when an animal, either a bat, monkey, or ape, or human becomes infected with the Ebola virus through contact with the reservoir host. This contact could occur through hunting or preparing the animal's meat for eating. So the Ebola virus can also be spread via droplet or droplet contamination. So, for example, fluids with large droplets from a sick person splashes the eye, nose, or mouth from either sneezing or coughing, and the other person then becomes infected. Also, there's direct contact. So if someone were to, get in contact with infected urine, sweat, even saliva from kissing or sharing drinks, feces, breast milk, or semen. So, going back to what I was saying earlier, for example, if you come into contact with a man who has recovered from Ebola and you have either had oral, anal, or vaginal sex, you can then become infected. So, that's something to think about. Some other things um, for how the virus is spread is through healthcare providers or healthcare settings, because they can also transmit to other providers or patients if they come into contact with a sick person or they are not adequately sterilizing any of their equipment. So here's a picture, just going back to how it's transmitted. You can see animal to animal transmission. Here's the bat. This is a duiker, it's an antelope. Here, you have a monkey and an ape. So they can all transmit the virus to each other, and then also, this human can become infected using the spillover event. So this is kind of interesting. So you can even become infected by someone who has died of Ebola. As you can see here, this person is infected, and these people are at risk. And then you have a survivor. Ebola survivors face new challenges after recovery. So some survivors report them being very tired all the time, their muscles ache, and they face this kind of stigma, kind of like people do when they find out that they have HIV, and it's very hard for them to reenter the community. It's really hard for them to have relationships with other people because of this virus. So the natural reservoir has yet to be identified and still remains unknown. However, some evidence based research believes that the virus is animal borne and that bats are the natural reservoir. And so this picture over here on the right is a great example of the spillover event where Ebola can be spread through coming into contact and handling raw meat, such as bats. So the genome for the Ebola virus is fairly complex. Ebola is a single-stranded negative sense mini genome RNA virus. So this virus has at least 4 different proteins, such as a large polymerase protein, a surface glycoprotein, and 2 nucleocapsid associated proteins. So these proteins are what makes the virus highly virulent, and the virus's shape can branch out and either be U-shaped, six-shaped, or circular, and ranging in a diameter between 80 nanometers to 14,000 nanometers. And typically, the infectious particle length for Ebola is around 970 nanometers. So, this is an interesting slide because not too long ago we were hearing about, a really bad outbreak in West Africa and that it was also affecting the USA. So, the Ebola cases in the USA, so looking at this map, it's sort of hard to see the key right here. But if you look at the map, the red dot um, is located, and we see Ebola cases with fatalities, and in the U.S., in the northern part of Texas. And in the northern part of New Jersey, where the green dot is, this indicates Ebola cases without fatalities. The blue dots located in Maryland, Georgia, and on the border between Nebraska and Iowa. This indicates Ebola patients who were evacuated from other countries and brought to the States. So maybe someone or some Americans who were visiting Africa became infected with Ebola and then had to be evacuated to the U.S. for proper care and contamination. And then this gray circle over here in Montana indicates biocontainment units. So far, we know that there has only been 2 cases contracted in the U.S. Um, Cases first diagnosed, and there's 4 that were first diagnosed. 7 cases were evacuated, 11 total cases, 2 deaths from the Ebola virus, and 9 Ebola recoveries, and 0 active cases as we know of right now.